All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. It should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. You can ask your questions at any time 24/7. You do not have to wait for the live office hours to start until until you can ask a question. You can ask them anytime and it will be answered during the next live office hours. If you're for some reason unable to make the live office hours, no worries. I do recommend that you do attend the live office hours just in case you have a follow-up question or if I have a follow-up question. So that way your question can get answered in the best way possible. But if you're unable to make it, you can still see the answer to your question by accessing the archived office hours. And you can access that by clicking the green button below the video here. Lastly, I want to mention I do offer online lessons. This is where you can work with me one-on-one, get a personalized plan to help you with your game with personalized eyes on your swing. We use an app called OnForm, which makes it very, very easy for you to send videos to your instructor and for the instructor to give you feedback and detailed feedback on exactly what you need to do to get better. So it's an awesome tool that helps you if you're interested in doing that, or maybe you're on the fence. If you follow the link above the video here about the online lessons, I have lots of video testimonials on there from folks that I've worked with. You can hear it from them, how much the online lessons have helped. So if you're on the fence, go check those out. And if I have spots available, be sure to sign up. I'd love to have the opportunity to work with you. If I don't have any spots available, no worries. Just click to join that wait list. So that way, whenever I open up spots in the future, we'll send out an email to everybody that's on the wait list. And then that gives everybody on the wait list a little bit of a head start to sign up. All right. So let me refresh this. I'm not seeing any new questions in there at the moment. Yeah, so new questions in here at the moment. So yeah, if you got your questions, post them in there. In the meantime, I'll try to find some some things to talk about here. So let's get something drummed up here. So today's July. What is the 25th? 7/25/25. All right. And sorry, I'm just going through my notes here, try to find some things to talk about. But in the meantime, if you guys got questions, make sure you put them in there. And we'll be happy to answer them for you. All right. Let's see here. Let's look at past questions here. Oh, we did just have one come in. Good. All right. So Greg A says, "Hi Q, blue brick driver specific question. Should I be closing the driver club face and forward press as I do with my irons?" You can. It's totally fine. It's more about what's happening at impact. That's the most important thing. So if you find that putting your hands forward at impact helps you to hit the ball better. Now, as far as shaft lean is concerned, you're not going to have as much shaft lean with a driver because of the ball position, right? But your hands are going to be in a similar place, right? So if you kind of look at, where'd my club go? Right here it is. So if you kind of look at impact position with an iron, will kind of be like this, right? So if I have my ball position pretty close to the middle of my stance here, if I come into, when I'm coming into impact, right, I want to kind of be in that area there. Doesn't have to be exactly that. We don't have to necessarily have that much shaft lean, especially in the longer clubs. And the wedges, I like to see that much for sure. Pretty much all levels. But as we go up through the bag, you may not need as much shaft lean as maybe a tour player does, because you may not have as much speed as a tour player, right? So, but if you think about it, if this is my ball position for an iron, and that's where I'm coming in, and then I'm not going to switch to a driver here, but imagine now I have a driver in my hand. I'm going to take a little bit of a wider stance, and then my ball position is going to tend to be more forward. Well, look, I'm going to come into impact. My hands are going to be a very similar position, but look, I don't have much shaft lean there, and that's really just due to the the ball position. I'm really my hands are in a very similar position, but relative to the ball, they're not in the same position because the ball has moved forward, right? So, yeah, and that's not to say you can't have a lot of shaft lean with your driver. There are players that do, but you need to have a driver that works well with that. So, players like John Rahm and Dustin Johnson, they both have a fair amount of shaft lean with driver, right? They're coming in, they're kind of like this, with their driver coming in. They have a fair amount of shaft lean. Those guys play like 11 and 12 degree drivers. So most people aren't playing drivers with that kind of loft. Now, if you have that much shaft lean and you don't have as much speed as a John Rahm or a Dustin Johnson, which most people don't, you probably need even more loft than that to get the ball up in the air and keep it in the air, because you may not have enough spin to keep the ball up in the air to help you to hit it farther. So that's why I definitely recommend getting fit for driver. But the address position is driven by what's happening at impact. All right. We want to set up in a way that gives us the best impact position. So if setting up with your hands more forward at address gives you a great impact position, then by all means do it. If having your hands more in the middle of your body gives you a better impact position, by all means do it. If you look at the best players, you're going to see players that do both. You're going to see players that have their hands more in the middle of their body. You're going to see players that have their hands more forward. I will say, typically, if you have a stronger grip, you're going to typically be more comfortable with your hands forward, because if I have a stronger grip, meaning my lead hand is more on top of the grip and my trail hand is more under, if I have that kind of grip and I put my hands in the middle of my body, to me, this is very uncomfortable. It puts my lead wrist in a very uncomfortable position. So for me, if I just kind of relax and I have that strong of a grip, that's just where my hands want to be. So that's kind of what I would tend to go to, is focus on what's happening at impact, and then have your hands in a place at address that allows you to make the best backswing and downswing and best impact position and achieve the best impact position. There's no one place your hands have to be, right? You can have your hands in all kinds of places and play good golf. Keep in mind, your hands, the ball doesn't care what's happening at address. It only cares about what's happening at impact. So everything that you do in the golf swing is to set up what's happening at impact. So that's the way you want to look at it. I know a lot of people are looking for an answer, like they want to know specifically exactly where they want to be, but there isn't a specific answer. And that's kind of the cool thing about golf, right? That's kind of a lot of what Top Speed Golf's message is all about, is that there's only so many things that really matter in the golf swing, where we don't really, we kind of do these things somewhat blindly, because it's what every single good player does. And it's difficult to hit good golf shots if you're not in these positions. And that's really what the Top Speed Golf system is. Then, the stable fluid spine, the power turn, lag, all that stuff. Those are all things that we see all the best players do. And it's hard to play high level golf if you're not doing those things. Outside of that, it's all kind of your own special sauce for, the way you want to look at it. Look at Scotty Scheffler, for example. Scotty Scheffler, by no means, in my opinion, some people might have different opinions, but I don't think he has the most aesthetically beautiful golf swing. He's moving around all over the place. He's off balance, or it looks like he is. He's twisting his ankles. He's, all that stuff. Jake Knapp, to me, that's beautiful, because it's so smooth. It's just easy power. It just looks like it's effortless. That's a beautiful looking golf swing, to me. But both of them played at a high level, right? Obviously, Scotty Scheffler is another level above everybody else. But it just kind of shows you, even if you look at like the top guys, Rory's swing doesn't look like Scotty's, and Bryson's and Xander Schauffele. They all have different looking swings. They all have a lot of different things going on. They do different things in the address position. They have their hands in different places. They do different things at the top. They do different things in the downswing. But they're all doing very similar things through impact, and that's really what matters. And they're all doing the Top Speed Golf system. So that's really what we want to focus on. So play around with your address position to find what works best for you. That's what I would suggest. All right, let's keep it going here. All right, let's see if we got some past questions from this week. That'd be cool to answer here. Let's see here. Let's see here. All right. That's from the 22nd. Sorry, I'm just waiting for a good question to come in. I'm trying to find some other questions we can talk about here. Okay, let's see here. Just don't have a lot this week, do we? All from kind of the same person too. All right. Sorry, just setting this up here. All right, so James L says, how do you stop hitting the ball off the heel? So this is typically what I recommend doing. This is what I call my heel bias protocol. So if you have trouble with hitting the ball off the heel, this is what you want to do. So first, get yourself an alignment stick. That's one thing you want to use for this. The other thing you want to use for this is some foot powder spray. We don't need it for this first part, but this is the stuff that I recommend, Dr. Scholl's Odor X. That's the good stuff here. That's the stuff that we want. Blue and yellow can, you get this at about any pharmacy. It's $5 or $6. That's what it is here in Florida anyway. So I'll go over the tips for you using that once we get to that part, but you're definitely going to want to get some of that. All right, so for part one of this, no golf ball. All right, so no golf ball for part one. And what we're going to do is we're going to get in our normal setup position with no golf ball. And in our setup position, we're going to set up with this stick pointing toward the target. And the heel of the club is going to be resting on the stick. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a swing where you go up to the top and then you come down and you brush the ground on this side of the stick. So you're setting up with the heel resting on that side of the stick in your normal setup position. So we're not cheating it and setting up like this. Normal setup position, just as if you were to set up to a normal ball. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go up to the top and then come down and brush the ground on the inside of the turf or on the inside of the stick. We want to get 10 in a row where we take a normal speed practice swing. We come down, we brush the ground on the inside of the stick. The reason why we got to get 10 in a row is that we have to get good at this part before we can go on to the next part. The other thing that I like about it is that it adds a bit of pressure. Once you get to kind of like that 7, 8, 9 in a row, you're going to start to feel a little bit of pressure, and that's good for you. We want to feel that. That's only going to help us to play better if we can execute under pressure, right? So that's another reason why we got to get 10 in a row. So 10 in a row so we can get good at it, and also so that we can feel some pressure and, get through that pressure. And the more we can do that, the better off we're going to be, right? So, and in doing this teaches you how to get the club to work closer to you through impact, right? Because that's really what's happening when you hit the ball off the heel. The club's working too far away from you. So what we want to do is we want to get the club working toward us. So if you imagine if the ball was actually here, the ball was actually sitting here, right? And I swung and I hit this part, I would just miss the golf ball. So it's kind of an extreme feel to help you to get out of the way, All right, so that's part one. We got to get 10 in a row. Part two, now what we're going to do is we're going to get the ball involved. And now we're going to set up with this ball in the middle of the face, but we want this ball in a position to where the stick is just lightly touching the toe, right? So just like this, I'm set up here. The ball is set up in the middle of the face, and the toe of the club is resting on that stick. And what I need to do is I have to hit that ball without hitting the stick. And again, I got to get 10 in a row. Now, when you're hitting this ball, keep in mind, these aren't going to be good golf shots because they're going to be struck off the toe. Because if we're set up in the middle of the face and we're missing that stick, then that means that we are hitting the ball off the toe. So the goal of this is not to hit beautiful golf shots. The goal is to get the strikes in the toe. And if we set it up correctly, which you want to make sure you don't cheat it, make sure that you're setting up with that ball in the middle of the face and with the stick just lightly touching and making contact with the toe of the club. If you do that and you miss the stick, then the strike has to be on the toe, right? It just has to be. So we got to get 10 in a row doing that. And when we do this, we're calling upon the same feel that we had when we were doing part one. So you need to, when you're doing part one, pay attention to what you are doing, how your body is moving to get yourself to hit on this side of the stick, right? And that's the same thing that you want to employ here. And that's part of what part one is all about, is to show you that you can absolutely move the club head closer to you because you're moving it close enough to you to where you would be absolutely missing the golf ball. In this part, we're just asking to move it a little bit closer to you to where you would where you wouldn't hit the stick. All right. So again, we got to get 10 in a row. We get that pressure in there. That's going to be good for you. All right. Now, once we got 10 in a row, now we're going to go to part three. Part three, we're going to get the stick out of the way, and this is where the foot powder comes in. All right. Now we're going to get the foot powder out. So let's talk about a couple tips for using this. So one, shake it up really, really good. If it's not shaken up good, then it's probably going to spray on somewhat clear, and it might be more difficult to see. So shake it up really good so that way that nice white powder comes out of it. The next thing is we don't need very much. Very, very light coating. I like to think of it as you're only spraying it on there for a second. And for that second, I'm just kind of going like this. So I'll show you how to shake it up really good. And this is how I like to put it on. Just like that. So you can see I just shuck it back and forth so that way it gets some good coverage on the face. But I didn't sit there and spray it. It was just like 1 second that I pushed that down and then took it off. And the next tip is to give it about 10 seconds to dry. When it sprays on initially, it's wet. So it's not going to look as white. And a lot of people will just keep spraying it because it doesn't look white yet. So if you spray it on there for just that 1 second that I was talking about, you kind of spread it out, and you give it 10 seconds, it's going to eventually give you that nice white, thin white film on there. You don't need much, and that will allow you to see where the strike is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up to the ball again the way I normally would, and I'm going to pretend like that stick is there, and I got to get 10 in a row on the toe side of the club, right? Because that's really how you get rid of a heel bias. Is you have to get good at hitting it off the toe. So we've done a lot of things here to show you can hit it off the toe. And now we just got to get 10 in a row where we hit it off the toe. And it makes it a little bit more difficult because that stick's not there. And this helps us to be able to transfer to the golf course because on the golf course, you can't have that stick there, right? Now we can't have the foot powder spray either, but we're just using the foot powder spray as feedback, right? We're doing this with basically nothing else just to show, hey, I can hit the ball off the toe if I want to. So we're going to get 10 in a row off the toe. And again, we're calling upon the feelings from drill one and drill two, right? Drill one, where we're dang near missing the golf ball, right? Or we would technically be missing the golf ball, right? And then part two, where we're using that feel and we're actually hitting a golf ball and we're avoiding hitting the stick. And then part three is where we take away the stick and then do the same thing. We have to visualize those things are there. We get those 10 in a row. Once we get that 10 in a row, then we're just going to tone down that feeling to get the strikes more in the middle of the face. And that's typically going to do the trick. Now, sometimes you may need to do this frequently, right? If you have a really strong heel bias, this may be a drill that you need to do somewhat often to keep moving that bias or trying to move that bias toward the toe. So this is what I would do if you're struggling with a heel bias. All right, let's keep it going here. Make a quick note here. Okay. So Guffron says, hi Q, when I do spine tilt with my woods, I top the ball. Sometime it goes up. It's hard to say without seeing your swing. I would just make sure that you're trying to hit down and through the ball. With a wood, if you're hitting a shot off of the ground, the same thing needs to happen with a wood, with like a fairway wood, than it does with an iron, right? So a lot of times when people struggle with hitting fairway woods, I often see it's because they're putting the ball position too far forward. And for a shot that we're hitting off the ground, we have to hit down on that ball. And if you put the ball position too far forward, it's very difficult to hit down on the ball. So I'd recommend moving the ball position back to a place where you can make ball first contact by hitting down on it. And also, when we tilt back, what we don't want to do is hang back. There's a difference between being tilted. See, I'm tilted away, but I'm still getting my weight forward, and being tilted and hanging back. Because if I tilt and hang back, my club's gonna bottom out here. If the ball position's even, let's say the ball position's even in the middle of my stance, right? I'm going to be hitting up on it. So if I'm hitting up on a ball that's on the ground, that's going to really heighten my chance of topping it. My chances of hitting it solid go down to very minimal. Your best case scenario is probably that maybe your ball is sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee, and you're able to hit up on it a little bit, and maybe you can hit it thin if you're really hitting up on it a lot. But generally, you're going to top it like you mentioned. So what I'd recommend doing is making sure, what I would try to do is hit your fairway woods the same way you hit like your 6 and 7 iron. Do the exact same thing. Exact same setup, exact same feel of the swing. Do the exact same thing, and you'll likely be a lot more successful with it. If you try to hit your fairway woods like you hit your driver off of a tee, because we can put the ball forward with the driver off of a tee because the ball is elevated, right? That gives me space underneath the ball to be able to hit up on it without hitting the ground first. But when the ball's on the ground, we don't really have that space. We have to hit down on it. So fairway woods, you want to hit them, when we're hitting them off the ground, we want to hit them very similar to what we would hit like an iron, like a middle iron, the same exact way. Ball position, maybe a little bit forward to middle, weight shift forward, hit down on it. Now you may not get a divot and things like that because of the shape of the club. For an iron, it's typically going to have a sharper leading edge and a narrower sole, right? When you have that, you're going to be more likely to have a divot, just like you're more likely to have divots with a wedge, right? A sharper leading edge. Now they typically have a wider sole, but with that sharper leading edge, you're going to tend to have more divots because that's going to tend to make the club want to dig more, right? With a fairway wood, right, softer leading edge, it's also typically rounded on the bottom part, and it's softer. It's not as harsh of an edge here. It's usually a larger radius, and it also, the whole club is a sole, right? For a wood, the whole club is a sole, so it's not going to tend to want to keep digging into the ground. So you may not get much of a divot, even though you may come through the ball the exact same way. So that's why I think when we watch on TV, we see these pros like oftentimes not taking divots when they're hitting fairway, but sometimes they are. A lot of times it depends on the lie and things like that and what they're trying to do with the shot. But oftentimes they're not really taking a divot, and that's not because they're not hitting down on it. That's because of the shape of the club. The shape of the club doesn't allow the club to really dig very much, so you're going to get little to no divot typically when you're hitting a fairway wood, unless the ground is like really soft, wet, tight kind of conditions. That's going to tend to lead more to those divots. But if we have plush, dry, firm conditions, that's going to lead to less of a divot. All right, let's keep it going. All right, let's keep it going here. All right, so we got a question from Evan here. Says, should I track fairways in regulation? That's a good question. That's a stat that we often see, and a lot of times we link that, the fairways in regulation, we link that to great driving. But the reality is that I don't think that that's actually representative of great driving, because you can hit a terrible drive and hit it in the fairway, and you can hit a great drive that puts you in a great position and not be in the fairway, right? Now, if we were always playing courses that had U.S. Open style rough in them, I think it would be more of a prominent stat, right? But there isn't a high correlation to like handicap and high level play to fairways and regulation. Now, greens in regulation, very, very high correlation. Club head speed, high correlation to handicap. But fairways in regulation, not really the most correlation to handicap, to lower handicap. So typically, if you're going to track something in there, what I would generally like to track would be what I would call good drives, right? So this would be a drive where you got good distance and you have a reasonable shot at the hole, right? And this would be, you kind of have to play it. You kind of have to use a little bit of judgment with it. And whenever I'm doing something like that, I like to be fairly stringent with the judgment. Like if there's any gray area, I typically go the way of it wasn't good enough. Because if it's on the fringe of not good enough, to me, it's not good enough, right? So what I would call a good drive would be a drive that has reasonable distance, right? So if you hit one way off the heel and it went, 40, 50 yards shorter than what you intended, then that's not reasonable distance. Even if it's in the fairway, I wouldn't call it a good drive. And if you hit the ball, you hit a huge slice and maybe you got decent distance on it, but it's in another fairway over, I'm not going to call that a good drive either, because that's not really what I intended to do. So I'm going to call good drives that are going mostly in the direction that I'm intending and are at least giving me a good position to hit the next good shot. If that's in the rough, I'm going to count that as a good drive. If it's kind of in the realm of where I'm aiming, right? And just like when Bryson won his first U.S. Open, he wasn't, a lot of times he wasn't even going for the fairway. The fairway didn't even matter. He was just hitting it wherever the best spot. He was doing a drive and gouge, where he was actually hitting in U.S. Open style rough, and he was just hitting it so long that he was able to hit a wedge out of it, and it was easier for him to hit a wedge from 80 yards than it was to lay back and hit an iron shot from 170 yards. It was better for him to drive it, so that's what he did, and it worked out really well for him. So I kind of thought he might do the same thing at Oakmont, but he didn't really go that route, it seemed like. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I would kind of like to do. And then on top of that, I would track the misses, right? So I would say, okay, heel toe miss, I would track that, and I would track slice hook miss, and I would track pull block miss, right? So if the ball is curving too much to the left, I'm gonna make a note of that, right? If the ball is curving too much to the right, I'm gonna make a note of that. If I hit it way off the heel. Now keep in mind, a heel and a toe strike can cause the ball flight to do some things. So if I hit the ball off the heel and it causes a slice, I'm just going to put myself down for a heel strike, because that's what caused the slice, right? But if I'm hitting it solidly and the ball slices, then that is because the face is too open, and I need to maybe work on getting the face more closed, right? And then you'll start seeing some trends, and you'll know exactly what you need to work on to get better. So that's what I would track: good drives, and then the drives that aren't good, I would make a note of what the miss was. So one thing you can do is you can put heel, toe. You can have like a tracking sheet, and you could have heel, toe, slice, pull, hook, block, and then you could make tallies, right? So you could have good drives and then have all the misses, and then I would just have tallies, right? And if it's a good drive, it's not going to really have, those things, right? If it's a poor drive, then you want to make a note. So that's typically what I'd recommend doing to kind of help you to understand what you need to work on. All right, let's keep it going. All right, we got about 30 minutes left if we have any more questions. If not, no big deal. Feeling tight today for some reason. Yeah, so we got plenty of time left. We got about 30 minutes. I can see if we can find some more stuff to talk about here. Let's see here. All right, so we got a question here from Paul K. Says, is shallowing the same as swinging into out? It's not exactly the same. Typically, if you're shallowing, you'll be into out. Typically, if you're into out, you will be shallowing. So let's talk about the difference between the two. But they're not. They can be. You can be shallowing and not swinging into out, and you can be doing the opposite. Sorry if I'm not articulating that quite correctly, but they're not the same thing. So let's talk about what it actually is. So let's first talk about what into out is. What into out is, let me move this alignment stick here. Let's say this alignment stick represents my target line. When we say into out or out to in, that is how the club is moving through impact relative to the target line. So that's the right or left movement of the club through impact relative to the target line. That's basically what club path is. And that's what we're talking about when we say into out or out to in. So if my club is working from inside the target line to outside the target line through impact, that's into out. If my club is working from outside the target line to inside the target line through impact, that's out to in. So what shallowing is, it's about the mass, the center of mass of the club head, or the center of mass of the club being shallow or behind, trailing the force that is being applied into the handle. That's what shallowing is. I know that kind of sounds complicated, but let me explain exactly what that is. So to simplify things, let's say I'm going to talk about the actual club head as being the center of mass. It's not technically the center of mass, but just to make things simpler, let's say that the club head is the center of mass. And then we're going to call the hands or the grip here where the force is being applied. So if I'm coming down like this, I'm coming down steep. Well, that club is going to want to go outside my hands, or what's going to tend to happen, what better golfers tend to do, is they'll actually, if they start down steep, they'll actually start to push the hands out that way, And now they're getting that club head behind the hands. The problem with that is look what happened to my club face. So if I start down like this, and then I go like that, and I got the club shallowing, but I got it shallowing late because I was steep early, and then I shallowed it late. And then when you shallow it late, because you have to apply this kind of force onto the handle to get the club head behind you and to get the club shallowing, that club face just naturally wants to open up. And now I have to kind of manipulate in time, rolling over my hands perfectly to square up the face. Now, if you have great hand-eye coordination and all that stuff, you can play great golf doing that. But it's not what we see most players doing, most of the better players doing. What most of the better players are doing is they're getting this club shallow early. So basically at the start of the downswing, this club is in a flatter position. And now when my hands want to work that way, now the club is going to want to kick out to the ball, and that club face is going to want to square somewhat naturally. Right? It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily square naturally, but there isn't going to be a force on this handle that's going to make the club face want to open. The forces that we're applying are going to make they're going to make the club head come down on a more neutral plane down to the ball, and they're also going to get that club face squaring, right? So if I'm shallow earlier, then I can whip that club out to the ball, and that face is going to want to square up. But if I'm steep early, then I'm going to want to stand up and put my hands out away from me. That face is going to get open, and now my path might be from the inside or more on a neutral path than it was before. But now I've got to flip my hands and time the face. And that just makes things a little bit more difficult for most golfers. So this is part of the reason why Clay, when he was designing the blue brick, if you're not familiar with the blue brick, this is an awesome training aid that Clay spent years, or at least a year on. I can't remember exactly how long, but he spent some time working on. And we got access to data for tour players, professional golfers' vertical swing plane. And that's what these angles for the shallowing are meant for, right? So if you imagine, if I'm steep, right, then my vertical swing plane is going to tend to get more vertical because I have to stand up to push my hands out away from me, and then then I got to flip my hands through impact. But if I get this club shallower, then that's going to flatten my my vertical swing plane, and that's what these sticks are meant to help you to do. So on here for the shallowing drills, we have driver, 6-iron, and sand wedge. But you can use any club in the bag with this. Obviously, not putter. You're not working on shallowing with the putter, but you can use any club in the bag. So for driver, the driver slot, you're just using driver. For 6-iron, use any, like all your fairway woods, all your irons are going to be used in there, all hybrids. They're all going to be within a degree or two of each other, so that's why you can put that in there. And then for the sand wedge slot, any wedge, I would put it in there. So I have a wedge right here, so I'm going to put this in the wedge slot, and you can see how it creates this angle. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this in the driver slot, so that way you can see the difference there. Now if I put this in the 6-iron slot, you're going to see there really isn't much difference there. It's slightly flatter than the wedge. And to be honest with you, with the tolerances and stuff, this tolerance of the sticks, the tolerance of the holes and all that stuff, it may come out very, very similar, almost the same. But it's okay. It's as long as it's within a few degrees of where you need to be, it's going to work really, really nice. So I'll go ahead and put this stick back because we got this stick on the ground. But if you're you want to work on shallowing the club, what I recommend is working with a blue brick because it really gives you the best markers to kind of figure out what you need to do. So first, we want to get our club working down on this kind of plane with a wedge, right? So starting out, if you're someone that's really coming down steep and over the top, then I would start out with about 2 club heads of space and work on swinging underneath this. Now, a key checkpoint that I really like for this is at lead arm parallel in the downswing, we want to see this club either parallel with this stick or even a little bit shallower to that stick, because that's going to allow us to come down and allow us to get the forces acting on the handle the correct way. But if we come down like this, I can still get the club to shallow, but the problem is I'm going to have to stand up to do it, and then I'm going to have that flippy hand. So that's why we want to make sure when we're coming down that I'm getting this club a little bit shallower to it. So some things that we want to look at to make sure that we're doing that is one, spine angle. We've got to get our spine angled away. It's very difficult to get that club to work down on that plane. So let me show you. I'm going to go and I'm going to have my spine angle leaning toward the target. Well, look what happens to the club. See how it gets like this? Now, if I get more angled away, now look what happens to the club. It gets a lot flatter, right? So spine angle is a big piece of this. So we want to make sure that our spine is nicely angled away, like Clay talks about in the Stable Fluid Spine course. That's the first part. The second part is we want to make sure that our elbow is kind of working inward, right? So it's okay for it to be kind of flying out at the top, but we got to get it to be working inward, because if I'm coming down and I keep my elbow out, look what that club wants to do. That club wants to steepen. So when I get up to the top, I got to get my elbows kind of working toward the ball. Try to feel like my elbows are kind of driving toward the ball with my spine angled away. And look, that club just wants to get underneath that stick very easily, when I do that. So those are kind of be two major things there. Another thing is ball position. If the ball position is really far forward, even with like the long irons, we don't need to have the ball position that far forward. Now, if you're able to get the club to work down, shallow out, you make great ball first contact with the ball forward, keep doing that. That's totally fine. But if you struggle with getting the club to work down the way that it should in a shallow position, you're struggling with ball first contact, hitting a lot of thin shots, a lot of chunks, and your ball position's forward, I'd highly recommend moving it back. Moving it back, middle of the stance, something like that would be totally fine. You can totally hit great golf shots with the ball in the middle of the stance, because if the ball's forward and it's making you come down over the top and chunking thin, you're just not hitting good golf shots, right? So if we can move the ball position to a place to where it allows us to hit good golf shots, let's do it. It's just an easy change to make that a lot of people tend to overlook. So I would get to where you can do this fairly easily with about 2 club head widths of space between you and the stick there. Now, the reason why we need to move closer, a little bit closer, is because if we have it 2 club head widths away, it still gives you just a little bit of space to come down steep. You can still come down steep. So if you look here, I can still kind of come down steep and miss that stick, right? So if I move a club head away, well, now I don't have much space to come down steep at all. Very, very little space. So it basically forces you to shallow out the club, or you're going to hit the stick here. So now if you're struggling with shallowing out the club, you're struggling with getting the club to work down on the appropriate plane, or any other things, chunking, thinning, pulls, hooks, whatever it might be, I strongly recommend checking out the online lessons, getting an instructor to look at your swing. I offer online lessons. I love the opportunity to work with you. I work with a lot of golfers. If you're interested, go to the, if you're not on the office hours page right now, if you're watching this live, you're going to be on the office hours, but if you're not watching it live, go to the office hours page, and then at the top of the page there, you'll see a link where you can check out my swing reviews. If you go there, you'll see some video testimonials just from people that have done swing reviews with me. Take a listen to them, and they'll tell you how the swing reviews have really helped their game, and they've really enjoyed a lot of benefits from it. So if you're interested in that, go ahead. If you're interested in a blue brick, go check it out. If you go to the resources tab on the website, that'll bring you to the page with all the stuff that we recommend. Blue brick, VX1 wedge, other training aids, books, launch monitors, that sort of stuff. All the stuff we recommend is on there. You can find the link to the blue brick on there. All right, let's keep going here. Let's see if we got any questions. All right, so I'll pick up kind of where I left off yesterday a little bit with troubleshooting the driver. So basically, I think I've mostly just talked about hitting the ball in the middle of the face. If you want to check out kind of what I was talking about there, go to the archived office hours from yesterday, and you can get the information about the first piece that I talked about. So to be an elite driver, simply, these are just the things that you have to do. Let's simplify it, because really being good at anything is about mastering the fundamentals. I think a lot of people go away from that They go away from mastering the fundamentals. And really, that's what the best players in the world do. The best players in the world, they master the fundamentals. And if you want to be a good player, that's what you have to do. Focus on the things that matter the most. And again, this is what top speed golf is all about. It's all about something called the Pareto principle. So what the Pareto principle is, you may have heard it referred to as the 80-20 principle. This is where most of your results are going to come from a small number of things, right? And that's really what the top speed golf system is, right? Top speed golf system, these are the few things that we see all the best players do. And you're going to get most of your results from these things. So when we're breaking down driver, most of your results are going to come from, I would say, in this situation, it's probably more than 80-20. I would say almost all of your results are going to come from being good at these things. So one is hitting the ball in the middle of the face. Most overlooked skill in golf, in my opinion, is doing that, hitting the ball in the middle of the face. A lot of people have no idea where they're hitting the ball on the face, and a lot of people miss the middle of the face a lot and have no idea. So definitely recommend checking that out. Yesterday, where I go into detail, excuse me, in the discussion about getting the strikes more in the middle of the face. So that's part of it. The next part of it would be your face and path relationship. So what this means is, let me use the driver since that's what we're talking about. So when I say face, what I'm talking about is something called face angle. And this is basically a TrackMan launch monitor term that means the direction the club face is pointing at impact. This is going to largely dictate the start line. Now, your strike also dictates the start line. So for more information on that, go check out yesterday's office hours from the Office Hours Archive. And if I didn't mention, if you're just jumping on, to get to the Office Hours Archive, you just click the green button below the video here, and that will take you to the Office Hours Archive. So that will take you there. And then you can check out what I talked about with a strike location. But let's assume that we're hitting the ball in the middle of the face here. If you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face, the ball is going to start mostly in the direction of the club face. It's like 85% of the direction of the club face for a driver. For higher lofted clubs, it goes down, like for like a wedge, maybe like 70-75%. But for a driver, we're looking at like 85% for a low lofted club. So that's why that's very important. If we want to hit the ball straight, we got to have the face square, right? So that's a part of it. And then the path of the club. So that's referred to as club path. So we talked about that a little bit earlier when we were talking about shallowing versus in to out or out to in or whatever. When we're talking about in to out or out to in, we're talking about we're talking about the direction the club head is moving through impact, the right or left direction of the club head through impact relative to the target. The best drivers of the ball are going to be plus or minus 3 on face angle, club path, and then another thing that is called face to path, which is just the relationship of the two. So, for example, let's say that I'm swinging 2.5 degrees to the right, but my face is 2.5 degrees closed, right? I'm a right-handed golfer. So I'm swinging 2.5 degrees to the right, but my path is 2.5 degrees, but my face is 2.5 degrees to the left. Well, my face angle, right, is negative 2.5 degrees. So that's within the plus or minus 3. My club path is 2.5 degrees positive. That's within the plus or minus 3. But my face to path, which is the relationship of the two, right, the distance between the two, is 5, right? Because I'm 2.5 to the right plus 2.5 to the left. That's 5. So that's outside of that. For that shot is going to start to the left a little bit, and it's going to draw more to the left. I'm probably going to miss too much to the left. So that's why I'm saying we want to have a face angle that is plus or minus 3, a club path that is plus or minus 3, and then a face to path that is also plus or minus 3. So if I'm swinging 2.5 degrees to the right, my face angle needs to be in a zone that is, basically a 0.5 degree closed to like a degree or a 0.5 degree or to 3 degrees open, right? Because that puts me in that zone where I'm going to be less than 3, and I can't go more than 3 to the right because that gets me too far to the right. Because then my ball is going to end up being kind of like a block fade a little bit, which I don't like, a push fade, which I don't want. So it's all about getting those there. So let's talk about how to get our club path in a good position. The blue brick to me is the best tool for this because we can just put this in the driver position for shallowing, and now we know how our club needs to work down. It needs to work down underneath this stick. If I can get it underneath this stick, then I know that I'm going to have my club path pretty close to where I need to be. At least it's not going to be too much to the left, right? I'm going to get the club most likely in a good spot. Now, it's possible I could swing too much to the right, which if I do that, if I find that I swing too much to the right, it's very easy for me to do. I'm just going to go on the other side of the stick, right? This stick would go right here on the other side, and now I'm going to be swinging over the stick because now I can't swing too much out to in or too much in to out. So based on, if you don't have a very neutral club path, and a way that you can kind of check this is to look on video. So video your swing from down the line. Make sure you're set up down the toe line. Your ball flight's going to tell you as well. Basically, if you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face, you got a lot of curve on your shots, or you're hitting big blocks or pulls, odds are your path is probably a little bit off. So if you're slicing it or pulling it, odds are your path is probably too much out to in. If you're blocking it or hooking it, odds are your path is too much in to out. But you can hit a hook with a path that is out to in. Really, that's more of just the face being relative to the path, being too close relative to the path. But those would be ways you can kind of check it. But on video, we can use something called the shallowing line. It goes from the ball to the middle of the elbow, and we want to see this club just tracking underneath that line, just underneath it all the way down the ball. But like I said, the camera angle is really what's going to drive this. So when you're looking at it on video, you need to make sure that you are set up down the toe line, you're at hip level, and you're far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame. If you're not accomplishing those things, then it's going to be very, very difficult to assess it and know exactly, because it's going to throw off the angles. So that's why I recommend you make sure that the camera angles are good. But yeah, that's kind of how you check it. And very simply, if you struggle with that, if you struggle with too much in to out, you put it on the outside. You learn to hit some out to in, then you tone it down. If you struggle with too much out to in, you gotta swing from this side, get good at hitting it from the inside on this side, then you tone it down to get it more neutral, right? Now, for the face, that's going to be more about the curve on the ball. So if you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face and your path is good, but you have a lot of curve on your shots, then that means that your face angle is outside of that realm that I was talking about, the plus or minus 3, right? So if your ball is hooking, again, this is if you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face. If your ball is hooking, then your face is too closed, and we need to get the face more square or less closed. So ways to do that would be weakening the grip. So if you have a really strong grip where your lead hand's on top, getting that lead hand not as much on top of the grip, a little bit more on the side of the grip. Maybe a neutral grip is better for you. And also you're not necessarily going to have, I want to touch on this because I just ran into this with a student. Your driver swing is not the same as your iron swing. The way we want to think about this is, what are we trying to accomplish with the driver, right? With the driver, we're trying to basically swing with as much club head speed as we can and still be able to hit the ball in the middle of the face and have a neutral path and a square club face, right? That's what we're trying to do. So because of that, we'll typically take a wider stance, right? We'll take a more aggressive backswing, typically a longer backswing to be able to create more club head speed. We'll play the ball, we'll tee the ball up, right? So that way we can maybe hit up on it and not have any ground contact. And we'll put the ball forward, a little bit forward, so that way, we can hit up on it a little bit and hit the ball farther, right? Well, with an iron, it's a completely different task, right? For an iron, we're hitting that shot off of the ground. Even if we're hitting on a par 3, we're still, you can tee it up, but you're still hitting the ball. You're only teeing it up enough to kind of give yourself a perfect lie. The irons are built to be hit off the ground. So you want to kind of do that for the most part when you're hitting off of par threes as well. But we're trying to hit an exact distance, not as far as we can, but an exact distance, right? We have to make ball first contact in order to hit it solid. So we need to have a descending blow down to the ball, and which means we got to have the ball position more back, right? And we still want to have a neutral path. But because the ball position is in a different place, the swing is going to be different, because if the ball is more forward, I actually need to swing more to the right relative to what I'm doing with an iron. Because with the ball more back, if you think about it, your club's coming down an arc. So my club's working into out, into out, into out, and then out to in, out to in, out to in. So if you imagine, if I swing the club on the exact same arc with an iron, with a driver as I do with an iron, and the only difference is that the arc is just a higher, so I don't hit the ground, then if my ball position is normally here, if I can move this over, if my ball position is usually in the middle of my stance with an iron, right, and then I come in with an iron and my path is very neutral, it's turning the corner right at the ball. So it's not into out or out to in. It's just turning the corner right at the ball. Well, for the driver, if my ball position is up there and I make the exact same swing, well, now my path is going to be more to the left and my face is going to tend to be more to the left. So you can't really do the exact same swing. So if you're looking for, I think a lot of people want to think this way because they're always in the realm of, I want more consistency, right? And if I can think of having one swing that I have to do, then that will make me more consistent. But what the problem is that if you think of the driver swing and the iron swing as the exact same swing, it's going to make you inconsistent because one of them is going to suffer. And a lot of people have this where they hit their driver great, but they hit their irons bad, or they hit their irons great and they're at the driver bad. I'm sure a lot of us are in that boat, and it might be, you look in the mirror a little bit on this, right? It might be because you are putting those they're the same swing, but they're not. So I imagine you'll be more successful if you split them up and understand what needs to happen to hit a good drive. And to hit a good iron shot, because it's just not the same swing. So don't think of them as the same swing. They're not the same swing. You're hitting the ball in a different place in the arc. You're hitting the ball at a higher point in the arc. You're hitting up on it with a driver, down on it with an iron, typically, right? You're swinging more aggressively, longer swing, typically with the driver, shorter swing with the iron. So it's definitely not the same thing. So we don't want to think of them in the same way, because otherwise it's going to mess up one of them. All right. So we'll leave it at that for today. We'll pick that back up next week. But hopefully everybody has a great weekend. And think of some questions over the weekend. Post them in the chat, and we'll get them answered next week. All right. So everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend. Talk to you next time.